Arctic 2, Polar Research for Education, innovative program in Poland and Norway. Webinars.
The Polar Bear lesson is connected with our project Arctic 2. So it is the webinar connected also with the educational toolkit. And about the toolkit, I will tell you a little bit in the end of our classes, where you can find more materials concerning the polar bear. Okay, so there is a polar bear, our hero of today's classes. Oh yeah, hello, I can see more participants, so I'm very glad because the time is very early. Yeah, so in that photo you can see the male polar bear. It's a very nice question. What bear we can see, female or male? It's hard to say for the very first sight because when we can see the alone polar bear, and it is very often, and we can very often see it alone because only during the mating season or when we have the mother with the cubs, it is the only two situations, or maybe when we have a lot of food on the seashore, like that whale and the polar bears are grouping around. So the three situations when we can see the polar bear, one more than a one, let's say. So when we have an opportunity to see the female and male polar bear in the same time, the male is bigger. The weight is approximately 500 kilograms, and the female is about 300 kilograms. So, but when we are thinking about the details, the body is a little bit thinner around the neck, and the neck is a little bit longer than in the male case. So there are very very detailed features, but I will show you some photos of female polar bear, and it would be much more easier to distinguish them. There are approximately 19 populations of polar bears around the world. Of course, we are thinking about the Arctic area because it is the natural habitat of polar bears. The Arctic is a region in the northern hemisphere around the North Pole. It is not only the Arctic Ocean, but as well the northern territories of some countries like Russia, Norway, US, Canada, and so on. So 19 populations, it means that they are observed in different parts of the Arctic, but it is possible that they contact with each other, but due to a thinner surface of the sea ice, the populations can't contact so often like it was a few decades ago. So there are some threats, and the scientists emphasize it that, for example, the polar bear might mate among only their own population, and it means that in the future it might result in not so much variety of genetic variety of those populations. So it might cause some diseases, weaknesses of another individuals, and so on. So there are some threats connected with the global warming, and with the global warming, the sea ice surface in the Arctic is decreasing. So the polar bears can't hunting for seals and can't travel to the longest distances like it was some time ago. But the situation is still under observation. So There are many trends, but we will see in the future what will be those times that will come for the polar bears. In the Arctic, we have approximately from 20 to 25,000 of polar bears, so it's quite huge number because of course there are some territories, there are some countries where hunting for polar bears is still allowed, but for example, in Norway, from 73, it is strictly forbidden. So it means that there are some regulations that might help polar bears to survive. So the humans are more and more aware of the importance of that species in the Arctic. So yeah, the global warming affects the polar bears populations, but they also are able to adapt to changing environments somehow. So yeah, we need to observe all the situation. We will focus today on the population of polar bears that living close to the Barents Sea area. It is up to almost 4,000 individuals. So nice information is that that number is stable because, for example, Norwegian scientists are monitoring the polar bear situation around that area. On the left photo, there are some roads marked by blue arrows of polar bears traces, roads uh, close to the Svalbard archipelago. So it means, and you can see it very clearly, that they are very dependent of the sea ice. If we have much sea ice, like on that map, it is marked in white color, it means that there would be more polar bears because they are able to travel to the long distances. So, for example, when I worked in Polish polar station Horsund, it is a Polish scientific base located in the southern part of the Spitsbergen. As you can see, it is one of the point on the polar bears roads. So, for example, when we have the polar night, we were observing every time, every day, satellite maps with the data of sea ice. And when the sea ice was increasing, it indicated that we might expect the visits of polar bears. And it was true. We observed the connections between those phenomena. On the right side, there is a typical photo of people who are working at the station and are going to the field because polar bears are the main threat for humans in the Arctic areas, like in Svalbard archipelago and Spitsbergen. So every person who worked at Polish base need to have a gun, and of course, before going to Svalbard, uh, he or she participates in a special shooting training, and after that obtains special documents that are allowed to obtain again for 1 year on Svalbard area. So of course, if we are going to the field, we can't do it alone with at least one person more with gun with themselves to protect us against the polar bears. Only the guns are for protection. We can't hunt for the polar bears because it's strictly forbidden. Bear family is a very nice example of the cousins of polar bear. There are 7 cousins of polar bear that belong to bear family. I only mark the names of the species that are maybe not so obvious for us. But of course, the individuals like giant panda and brown bear don't need to be presented because we know them very well, I think. And there are also belong to the same family. So the birds live around the world, we can say, and of course there are some distinguishing features among them, but of course it belongs to the one family of predators. On the left side there is a hybrid, which means the two species joined in one. So it is called Peasley, the hybrid of polar bear and grizzly bear. Why we can observe something like this? Because due to climate change and decreasing of sea ice in the Arctic, polar bear are going inside the land because they are not able to swim for so long in the open sea ice, so they spend more time on the shore and go inland. So it means that they might meet another bears on the way, and they can mate. Why not? So as a result, we can observe such kind of an individual which has the features of one and the second species. Now that kind of hybrids, the Peasley hybrids, we can observe in the Alaska area, but maybe it would be also the future of the polar bear. They will mate with the other bear species because of some changes in the climate. So now it's rather a curiosity, scientific curiosity, but maybe in the future we will observe more such kind of individuals. We talked before about the ability to adapt of the polar bears to the climate change and the climatic conditions. We can observe it very clearly because the Arctic is a very special environment due to the very sharp, long winters, short summers, short vegetation period, midnight sun and polar night phenomenons. So the species, the animals that live in that area need to adapt somehow to that sharp climate. So we said that sea ice is very important for the polar bears because they hunt thanks to it and they might travel. So when we are talking about the hunting for seals mainly, because it is the main ingredient of polar bears diet, the polar bears have a very sensitive sense of smell. So it means that they can smell the seal in the distance of 30 kilometers, and the seal might be hidden under the snow that is 1 meter thick. So it's very good adaptation. It is the polar bears has also very special way of hunting because they are very patient. They are waiting for a long time close to the breathing holes that are made by seals. And after that, when they took away the prey, the seal, out of the breathing hole, they smash it with the front paws. So it looks like yeah, it looks terrible. You can see it, for example, on some films on the YouTube, but it is the way of hunting, that the method that polar bears used. And of course, when there are a lack of food, polar bears are able to starve for about 9 months. They might have fat reserves, and they can survive without eating anything. But of course, they are able also to change their dietary habits and go inland to take some eggs, small birds, chicks, berries, some plants. They also are an ingredients of the polar bear's diet. So not only seals, not only meat, the polar bears are able also to eat something different. When they are walking on ice, they have, as you know, very big paws, and the surface of the paws is very has a very special texture. It is like tires of the car, and the traction, and it helps to improve the traction. So it means that they don't slip on a icy surface, and the sharp claws also help them to walk effectively. Of course, when we spot a polar bear in that field, we can't run away from it. So if the polar bear are going to attack us, there is no way of escape. We are too slow to escape. So the only way is to use a gun. Of course, it's the last solution, but sometimes we haven't any other choice. On the right side, there is one of a very effective way of scaring away the polar bear, because we sometimes don't need to use guns to say the polar bear that is not the place for him or her. Why? That female polar bear on that photo is very curious because of the rain gauge. It is one of the scientific equipment that was located close to the Polish polar station Hornsund. And because of the curiosity, polar bears are able to destroy sometimes the equipments, buildings, and so on. So using flare guns, as you see on the right photo, is very effective because it is sound unusual for polar bears. There is something like fire, and it may cause that polar bear is afraid of it and it run away. So yeah, we don't have any trouble with them anymore. Cold protection, of course, another adaptation of polar bear to the Arctic climate, the very thick fur that is built of 2 layers. So it is a very effective way of protection against the cold. And another thing, when we talk a little bit about the hunting methods, look at the photo on the right side. There are a female polar bear with their cub. I know that for me it's hard to say which one is the mother and which one is the cub, because the cubs might stay with the mother for even 3 years. So very often they are the same size of their mother. But why I know that there are mother with the small polar bear, because as I said in the very beginning of that lesson, it is not usual. Polar bears aren't observed in pairs in the groups walking through the Arctic areas. They are alone. They are living alone. It's like their lifestyle. So that couple, let's say, that was observed for a few days in the area of Polish polar station Hornsund. So the people who worked that time in the base were absolutely sure that that they had an opportunity to see a mother with a cub. So on that photo, you can see very clearly how long is the neck of the polar bear and what kind of shape their head have. So it is very helpful during hunting, because when polar bear wants to catch the seal that emerge from in the breathing hole to catch a breath, the long neck is very helpful, because it can put the head directly into the water and take away the seal onto the sea surface. Also, the paws of the polar bear are very enormous, let's say, and as you can see, it is a very nice adaptation of walking on the sea surface. So it is polar bear might be very fast. So that's why we humans can't escape when we see the polar bear. Polar bear is uh, the main predator in the Arctic. So it means that there is no other predators, no other species that might attack him. So she is a real king of the Arctic. Um, Norwegian scientists, because we were talking about polar bears in the Barents Sea area, are monitoring for many years the polar bears' behaviors, routes, and so on. The Norwegian Polar Institute, that is located in Tromsø in northern part of the Norway, carries on many research on polar bears. So one of them is the monitoring system of polar bear roads during the winter time. And thanks to it, because the animals has special colors with GPS, we can obtain the data what position of the polar bears are. So there is not only one program, scientific program, but some organizations like WWF also has like something like species tracker, and they are monitoring the roads of the polar bears. So you can find the information about this in internet. So it is very, of course, that there are not so many of the polar bears observed because it's not that easy. But it gives some pieces of information for the scientist about the age approximately, about the weight. Of course, before the collar is put on the polar bear's neck, the animal needs to be um, yeah, it is not possible to put it on a on the neck of a animal spotted, you know, in the field. So the scientists use a special sleeping pills or sleeping medicines to do it safely without killing and hurting the animal. Hibernation, or a state similar to hibernation, is typical for polar bears, but only pregnant females. Because it's not typical for polar bears to fall asleep during the winter time, so they take a nap regularly, but it's not a real winter sleep during that period. They are active whole year round. Only pregnant females in the beginning of September, make some dance in the snow or in some safe areas close to the glaciers, and they are waiting for giving birth to cubs in the beginning of the new year, January, February, and they are in a state of a hibernation. So only in that case we can see about a state that might be a little bit similar to the winter sleep, typical, for example, for the brown bears that we can observe in our climatic zone. We know that polar bears are fond of seals, but sometimes it's very hard to hunt for that animal because of the decreasing sea ice. For example, sometimes the populations of seals are not so big to hunt for them. The polar bear might be in a not so good health conditions. There are many factors that might cause that polar bears are unable to catch a seal. So, for example, other dead animals like whales might be also very nutritious source of food. And the other source of food, but of course not nutritious one, are rubbish. And unfortunately, it is on the one side the very simple way of obtaining a food, but on the second side is sometimes the only way of obtaining food. So polar bears may approach to the humans' villages, cities in the Arctic to look for food in garbage dumps, and of course it might cause some conflicts with humans. And in that situations, the polar bears are very dangerous for the people. So there is an information, and you can see when you search for it in the internet, you can see a lot of them. The situation was very unusual because in Siberia there were 52 individuals, 52 polar bears that was observed in one Russian village, and they went to the garbage dump to search for food. That was a very unusual situation because there was not so many polar bears observed in the same moment before, but it was caused by the very serious situation connected with the lack of the food. So yeah, we can, because of the climate change, we can observe a very untypical behaviors for the polar bears. Another threat, because we mentioned the conflicts, potential conflicts with humans, hunting, is a microplastic in the Arctic. Microplastic, there are very small pieces of plastic that nowadays might be observed everywhere. In the air, in the snow, in the sea ice, in the sea, very deep. The scientific research improve, say it and show it to us very clearly. There are many scientific programs organized to monitor how many microplastic we can have in the Arctic. Of course, the microplastic is not produced in that region of our planet. It is transported, for example, by ocean currents, by rains, snowfalls from different countries, and unfortunately are eaten with other type of foods by many species. So there are also some investigation what would be the impact of the microplastic on polar bears, and would be, for example, what would be the impact on the humans, because it is also, we are also the species that is that lives in the planet, and the microplastic is a huge problem for everybody, not for only for the animals. Um, we know that, for example, the plastic rubbish is very extremely dangerous to polar bears. Why? And not only for polar bears, because when they eat it, they might have full stomach of plastic that can't be digested, and in that situation, polar bears can't eat anything like their normal food, like meat or something, and they are starving. So in the end, they might die of hunger. So it is the influence, unfortunately, of human activity in the planet, of the huge production of plastic waste, and its distribution around the world due to ocean currents, for example. I said a little bit about the convention concerning the conservation of polar bears in Svalbard archipelago. That was a document signed in 73 by not only the Norway, but as well by US, Canada, Denmark, and Russia. So it decreased the hunting around many areas in the Arctic. And for example, in Svalbard, when the agreement was signed, there were only a few polar bear species, less than 100. So nowadays we can see that, for example, on the Spitsbergen Island, we have approximately 3,000 individuals. But in the 70s, it was less than 100. So it was a very last moment to start the protection of the polar bears. And there is on the right side the photo taken from Norwegian Svalbard Posten. It is the newspaper published on the Svalbard archipelago from 40s, I think. It is it is a newspaper with a very long tradition and the only one with such a northernmost location. And that situation occurred in 2013 when I worked in Polish Polar Station Horsund. That was very close to our station. In that small hytte, 3 people sleep for a couple of days. They spent their vacation there, and unfortunately, they had an encounter with the polar bear. It was a very young male polar bear, and it was really hungry. And polar bear started attack the people. They were inside that small house. They, of course, try to scary it away using many methods because they didn't want to kill it. But after 1 hour of trying everything, they decided to protect themselves because the situation was worse and worse, and they kill it. We talked about that people because after the accident, they visited our station. Of course, the governor of Svalbard was present in the place of the accident. The police, Norwegian police, investigated the whole situation. Of course, that was not the people's fault. They they used the gun on purpose. So it was in such kind of situation, unfortunately, the polar bears might be killed, but it is a kind of protection. And how about the future of polar bears? They are able to adapt, but we don't know what kind of direction it might have. So that's why the people, the scientists are carrying out many scientific programs on conservation of polar bears, on observing their behaviors. For example, the two, not two, one year ago. So it is a very, let's say, new situation, and was observed very close to the Polish base on Spitsbergen. And the people observe very unusual behavior of polar bear because it hunted for reindeers. Reindeers are two. Okay, thank you so much. Yes, it is the last slide of my presentation. So thank you for the participation. Yeah, so I only tell a little bit about that case, and we will finish. Yes, the reindeers are too fast for polar bears. So in the field, it can't hunt for it. But one polar bear had an idea how to cope with it. How it um, it tried to it forced the reindeer to go to the seashore, to the sea area, and it can't escape because from the one side there was open water, and on the other side there was waiting polar bear. So the reindeer has no choice and has no way of escape, and was killed by a bear. And in using that method, the polar bear attacked two reindeers. The scientists working in Polish Polar Station described the whole situation on the Facebook profile because it was very unusual situation, very interesting one. So maybe polar bears are able to evolve using other hunting methods like this, like that one, because it was something strange but very effective as a result. So we will see. Yes, as I promised, is this the last slide of the presentation. If you are interested in more materials concerning polar bear, I recommend you use the toolkit connected with polar bears.
Watch other recordings from webinars on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/EduArctic. EduArctic 2. From polar research to scientific passion, innovative nature education in Poland and Norway receives a grant of 240,000 euros received from Iceland, Liechtenstein and Norway under EEA funds.